Welcome to the Fintech Times News and Views podcast. Established in 2016, the Fintech Times is a global multimedia news outlet centered around the world's first leading fintech newspaper. We report on the latest and brightest ideas from the fintech world. Follow the conversation using hashtag TFD News and Views and follow us at the Fintech Times. Hello, and welcome back to the Fintech Times News and Views podcast. And finally, for the first time in weeks, we've got the whole gang back together. Francis, Tom, it is a pleasure to have you here. Finally, to be together again, talking about fintech. It's been a while.
It has. I'm excited. I've been missing for 2 or 3 weeks now. I was moving house and I had internet trouble, so it's good to be back with the gang. I've missed you guys. And I think we've got some banging news to get through today as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Francis, how are you doing anyway? How's things with you as well?
Everything is very good over here. It's exciting to have everyone back. It has been probably a month at the very least, I think, since everyone was here. So should be a good conversation today.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of good conversations, what have you guys brought to talk about today? Tom, what article are you bringing?
So the article I'm bringing this week is talking about SMEs that are struggling to meet their ESG targets and how Virgin Money is taking action to try and change this.
Fantastic stuff. And Francis, how about you?
So with Wealthtech being our monthly theme this month, I thought it would be quite nice and appropriate if we talked about our first article, which is all about budgeting and which Wealthtech has left the best impression in 2024.
Awesome stuff. And then my article this week is about a new financial wellness platform that has launched in South Africa. Who to go first this week? Francis, I'm going to pick on you since yours is the topical theme of the month. So why don't you take it away?
Yeah, absolutely. So, as I mentioned, this month is all about Wealthtech, and financial advice can be a sensitive topic really for all parties involved. Those giving it don't want to mislead customers, and customers don't want to be misled, but because of that, they're wary about the level of trust they can place in their advisors. After all, finances can sort of make or break a person a lot of the time. Nonetheless, done correctly, investing can be a very beneficial way for someone to use their funds effectively. And one of the big parts about how this can be achieved properly is through budgeting. So Wealthtech is often associated with investing, solely investing, but personal finance also falls under its umbrella. And it's a vital way that fintechs can have an impact in people's lives. So in order for customers to have a healthy attitude towards finances, they must be able to budget and understand how and when they should be spending money. However, as with a lot of things in finances, this is much easier said than done. But this is where Wealthtechs can step up. So in this article, we heard from a variety of different companies, all of which, none of them were speaking about their own companies. They were all talking about other companies and platforms and services that have impressed them this past year. And one that really stood out to me came from Peter Wood from Spectrum Search. And he explains how there is this Wealthtech platform called Emma. And it is a platform which he says almost acts like your own personal advisor, financial advisor, but just in your pocket without the complicated jargon and awkwardness that can be associated with having a financial advisor. He explains that the app tracks your spending across all your accounts and credit cards, and it gives you real-time updates. And it doesn't lump everything together. It categorizes your transactions and gives you a breakdown of where your money's really going. It also uses AI to give personalized budgeting advice on your spending. And it doesn't just react to, that big spending spree that a lot of us go on as soon as we get our paychecks. It sort of thinks ahead of the game and sort of advises you on what to do. And the reason this platform stood out to me the most was from a budgeting standpoint. When you're thinking about a Wealthtech app that is going to help your personal finance, this one seemed to tick all the boxes for me. So I really wanted to see if you guys agreed or if there was any others in the article that stood out to you as sort of the be-all, end-all budgeting platform and what it is that they're supposed to do and how impactful they can really be. Polly, I'll go to you first.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it was just to sort of note before I go into what you were saying. When I read this article, I was really struck by how I hadn't really thought about Wealthtech in this way and kind of how like personal finance and budgeting and things like that. And like in my head, it was like solely like investing and doing that. But actually, obviously, from reading this article, it's so much more involved in it. So that was a little learning moment for me, which I really appreciated. But yeah, I think, I have used Emma before. Actually, I downloaded Emma a while ago. I don't use it now for no particular reason. Just I'm quite lazy when it comes to things like that. But I've used Emma before and I really liked it. It's a really nice app. It's a really interesting interface, and I think it's one of many really fantastic personal finance / budgeting apps out there that are just so easy and really convenient to use. One of them I also really like is Snoop. That's another one I've used previously. That was just so simple to use, and it just kind of shows you your finances and what you're spending money on and ways you could save money even in a lot of interesting ways. And I think it's really interesting that we're seeing sort of the rise of these like budgeting apps and sort of personal finance apps, because like you're saying, having like the right financial advice can be quite tricky to get. I think especially with the rise of social media and like financial influencers on things like TikTok, you never quite know who to believe and who to trust and who's actually telling you the right thing, who's just out trying to scam you, which sounds really dramatic, but it's true. And then other people who have their own sort of agenda for a lot of different things, so it's hard to kind of tell who to listen to and who to trust. But so having a personalized app like Emma, like Snoop, like all the rest of them, I think is so handy, because it's kind of it's using your own data for your benefit, which I think is the key thing here. It is very personalized to you, and using AI again, that old chestnut. And I think it's just really interesting, and I really like these kind of apps, and I really like being able to just see your whole financial landscape just right in front of you on your phone, and it's so easy. And I think these kind of apps are definitely going to be the future of when it comes to sort of thinking about personal finances and thinking about setting a budget up, and especially given the economic landscape that we're in currently, especially in the UK, I think having apps like these are just so handy. And I really want more people to use them, because I do think there is still a kind of an element of fear when it comes to apps like these, using open banking, like sharing your bank details and then giving them the view to your banking. I know people still kind of have a bit of apprehension about that and its security and its safety, but I wish more people would use them, because they're just so handy and they're just so useful into everything that, trying to keep your finances up to date and healthy and keep things ticking along. They're really great.
Yeah, that was going to be the thing I was going to talk about next, really, is this idea of security, because while they are super impactful, and like you said, from a first-hand experience, it has been really helpful in the past, not even just Emma, but the other ones, Snoop as well, that you mentioned, and I'm sure all the ones that were listed in the article as well. There was some for businesses that help more with businesses, and some that help more for individuals. But I do think that you're right, that there is this sort of element of fear and potential, like you said, apprehension towards using open banking and trusting another app to use your banking data, especially when it uses AI to then give you advice. I think that can be something which feels like you're extremely vulnerable, because you're giving an app all this information. But Tom, what do you think? Do you think that with time people are going to come to trust open banking and AI and how it's used, or do you think there's always going to be sort of at least some sort of level of underlying fear about it?
I do completely get that kind of level of fear, to be honest. I've also tried Snoop. This was like at least a couple of years ago now, and it was quite stripped back at the time. It didn't have too many features. But I remember looking at it recently, because I was trying to remember which app I'd used, and realizing it had a bunch of new features. And I definitely think now there's a real reason to kind of get over that fear of, oh, I'm just giving my data to this company, because the benefits that it offers you are huge. I think Snoop has a new feature now where if it realizes that you're not going to, if you carry on your current rate of spending, you're not going to have enough money to cover your bills, it will tell you like, oh, you need to be careful, you don't have enough money to cover this bill that's coming out of this day. And just kind of having those kind of notifications and alerts can be so helpful. Obviously, being able to look over your finances in one place is such a hugely impactful kind of offering that people can use. And I mean, I'm guilty for not using anything at the moment. I'm so unorganized with my finances, but every time we have these kind of discussions, I'm always thinking there are so many benefits now. I'm like, I could definitely use one of these to get a much better view of my finances. I mean, sometimes I see, something coming out of my bank account, a £5-6 subscription that I forgot I even had, and I go, oh, how long have I been spending this? Oh, 9 months, and I didn't even know I had it, and it's come out of my account 9 times before I've gone, oh yeah, I've just seen that, and I didn't realize I need to cancel it. So I think having these kind of apps can really help to give you that kind of more just open view of all your finances. If you've got money in different accounts, different places, it's a good way to centralize all those. And I obviously do understand that the fear of, if I give my data to these firms, is it going to be safe? But I think a lot of these firms are, very reputable at this point. Like you said, Snoop and Emma are two that most people are aware of. They're very reputable. As far as I'm aware, security is absolutely fine. They're covered. They're regulated by the FCA. So these are firms that you can trust, and you would like to think that it's just only going to offer benefits. And I think that's really important. And yeah, if you were to ask me, I would to say definitely these apps are certainly worth giving a try at the very least.
Yeah, I think that's probably the best message to leave. Really is, some people might not find them that effective, but I'm sure for others they will really sort of see the value of it and benefit from it. So yeah, probably give it a try, see what happens, and then if not, just delete it again. It's all good. But yeah, with that, why don't we go to your article next time?
Sure thing. So obviously, ESG is a topic that we talk about so often, mainly because firms always like to share how they're meeting their own targets or their new launches to try and help other firms meet their ESG targets. Obviously, sometimes we talk about the more controversial side of it with greenwashing and things like that. But this week, new research from Virgin Money has revealed that although 71% of SME decision makers acknowledge that adopting ESG practices is important to their customers, only 68% are actually familiar with what their company's ESG targets are at all, while just over half, or 54%, haven't set any ESG targets in the first place. Now, according to the research, a quarter of decision makers within SMEs are not confident about the specific actions required to actually achieve ESG targets, and 51% are also waiting for regulatory or government guidance before making the necessary changes. And as always, cost is a hugely limiting factor, and 26% of those surveyed said that those who would set ESG targets for their business, they believe that meeting these goals could actually make their business uncompetitive, and 34% think it's actually just too expensive to implement in the first place. Now, recognizing these challenges, Virgin Media has launched what it calls its new Mobiliser fund, with plans to provide 20% of its business lending balance to businesses driving a transition to the next economy by the end of 2027. So by the 31st of March 2024, Virgin Money's business lending book had reached £9.3 billion. And through this new commitment, it basically says it's going to put 10% into customers whose core goods and services accelerate social and or environmental change. Now, for example, helping businesses depend less on non-renewable energy or even generate less waste. And then the other 10% of this commitment is going to support businesses that operate in traditionally energy-intensive sectors, such as agriculture or manufacturing, who it recognises are taking proactive steps to transition to, reducing its impact on the environment and getting towards a net zero economy. And obviously, as I said, there's still a bit of a knowledge gap when it comes to ESG. Businesses unsure, what steps to take. They're waiting for guidance. And to try and tackle this side, Virgin Media is offering its Sustainable Business Coach app, which basically provides an objective assessment of each business's ESG impacts and gives advice to them on how it can improve. Now, I really like this. I think this is a really good initiative. But I wanted to get your guys' take on, first of all, what you think about the launch. And really just ask, do you think this is the best way to bolster ESG efforts? Or do you think there are any other approaches that you think could be more effective, or is this kind of funding the way to go? Polly, I'll come to you first.
I also really like this initiative. I think it's really great to see a company like Virgin Money doing something about it, noticing the gap and, trying to come up with an idea and solutions to solve that gap. I think, when it comes to this kind of, the environment and social governance and this all sort of thing that we have going on right now, it is very quickly becoming, if not already become, something that's no longer a nice to have, right? Like, this is an essential, like keeping up with ESG targets, having ESG targets in general. It's no longer something that you can kind of get away with not doing. I think, right now, you really have to go full ham into your ESG practices, ESG strategies, and really, start thinking about that aspect of your business, which I know, as we saw in the article, some businesses aren't really doing. And you can understand, if you're a small business, it's difficult to come up with these sort of strategies and, translate that strategy into actionable things. So, like, it's completely understandable. But I think, having this fund from Virgin Money, I think, is going to be possibly one of the most, what's the right word? Having this fund from Virgin Money is going to be possibly one of the most effective ways to help with this, because at the end of the day, a lot of the time, I think the main issues are, when it comes to ESG strategies, is money. If you're a small business, you don't have a lot of spare cash lying around, and the thought of having to, fork out for another thing such as ESG, when you've already got like 101 other things that you need to pay for, actually that is a real bigger factor as to why a lot of people aren't doing it. So having a fund available for them to apply to and like actually get money to help them through this, I think is going to have the biggest impact, and that is going to be one of the biggest sort of pushes to change, because if you have funding, then suddenly things are a lot more achievable. I think another part of that is awareness. I think a lot of people maybe don't realise a lot of the time as to kind of what they need to do in terms of ESG, if they should even have ESG at all, that sort of thing. So I think awareness is also part of it, but I think from what I've read in the article, Virgin Money are going to kind of be doing a lot around awareness as well. But, I think that it's hard to see anything wrong with this piece. It's hard to see anything negative about the fund, and I think it's really great to see Virgin Money do it, and I really hope that they do be successful with all their businesses and really bridge this gap to provide the financial support to the smaller businesses, as well as I think resources as well they're providing, which is amazing. And I just really hope a lot of other similar companies really follow suit and offer their own funds, because at the end of the day, it is all about money. Unfortunately, that's just kind of like the way things work. So if more small businesses have access to funding, then a lot more can happen and a lot more can make a difference. So yeah, I think it's great.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think offering this kind of funding and also just the sort of knowledge and support in that sort of area is hugely important. And I think, to me, the major alternative, at least as far as I'm aware of, is companies buying carbon credits to offset their environmental impact. But I mean, certainly to me, it always comes across as a bit like, oh, they just spend money to get the problem away. It's like, well, we've spent money on carbon credits that will reduce the impact of it on the environment, so we can carry on emitting as much as we like, as long as we have the money to back it up. But I think this kind of initiative is far better on face value at the very least, because it means that firms are actually being rewarded and getting the funding to implement ESG initiatives that are going to reduce their environmental impact. And I think that's the way to do it, rather than just spending money to offset what you're already emitting. But Francis, what do you think? Is that the right way to do it, in your opinion?
Yeah, I think so. I think there were a few things that sort of stood out to me that I think were a little bit different from what you and Polly have just said. And it's the idea of firms sort of taking this wait and see approach. I think a lot of the time, the organizations that thrive the most are those that take like initiative and try to be the trendsetters almost, and take these ESG targets, make them known to their customers and say, this is what we're trying to achieve. Whereas those that are saying, well, I believe it was 51% in the article that said, let's wait and see for regulatory guidance from the government to see what ESG targets we want to implement. I think for me that isn't really the right approach, because, well, I understand it, because firms, the last thing a firm wants to do is to make this big change for ESG only for it not to meet the standards that the government will then put in place. And as the article mentions, implementing these targets can be very costly. So the last thing an organization wants is to make costly changes that then don't meet regulations. So I understand it, but I feel like the Virgin Money fund can sort of really sort of fill this gap, I suppose. The only issue is I feel like organizations shouldn't rely on the fund too much. The advice that it's going to be offering, I think, is the key thing more than necessarily the money. Because I think if organizations can take the advice and act on it before the regulations come in, because that's what 51% of organizations said. They said, we want some guidance. Well, if the guidance is made available to them, then I don't think they really have an excuse not to make these positive changes. So I think that was my main takeaway from the article, is that Virgin Money is sort of going to be a stepping stool with the money that it can provide. But I think the big takeaway from it is the advice that it's going to provide firms.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think, like you said, the big kind of aspect was the fact that they were looking for guidance. And specifically, they were looking for regulatory or governmental guidance. And I think it would be really important for those to step up really and offer that, instead of it being, while it is good, being kind of industry participants like Virgin Money to kind of step up and take that role on themselves. And I think, like you said, the advice that they're offering is fantastic. And if anything, I'd like to see the advice maybe go a little bit further with, just ensuring that they really do maximize the amount of guidance and knowledge that they can pass on to make sure that these companies do feel confident in just implementing these ESG goals. But with that, I think we've summed it up really nicely, and I do think it's a nice initiative, and hopefully we see more of the same in the future. And I think, Polly, you're going to round off what is a trio of kind of fintech for good related articles.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Tom. This does kind of feel like a very fintech for goody financial wellness kind of episode this week. But basically, my piece is all about Vault22, and they have launched a financial wellness platform in South Africa with the goal of improving financial literacy and empowering users to manage and grow their wealth. So a lot of this kind of does hark back to kind of what you were saying with your piece, Francis, when we were talking about Emma and other budgeting apps. But essentially, this platform from Vault22, which already has over 200,000 pre-registered users, is offering a range of tools designed to support financial fitness, including spending, monitoring, debt reduction guidance, and opportunities for wealth growth through investments. So again, another one of these nice little financial wellness, budgeting apps that people can use. So this... So Vault22 essentially aims to address the significant gap in financial literacy in South Africa, where a large portion of the population struggles with managing finances effectively. And according to the 2023 FinScope South Africa survey, 24% of South Africans consider themselves financially healthy, while 43% are coping and 33% feel financially vulnerable about their financial knowledge and ability to manage their finances effectively. So yeah, a lot of this kind of comes back to what we were saying with you, Francis, and kind of that article and things like that. But I think this is just a really interesting thing to talk about, especially since kind of obviously like the theme of the month, and like we were saying before about sort of the economic situation that we're kind of dealing with right now. And I think it's just a really interesting thing to see new platforms spring up like this. So, the Vault22 app has a lot of different financial wellness features that are all to kind of help people build, grow, and protect their wealth. So some of these features include real-time transaction alerts to help users manage spending, set spending targets, and help them staying accountable by tracking their spending and categorize transactions. The opportunity to invest money saved and grow it for the future, as well as, different ways that they can pay off debt in the most efficient way. And I think this is just a really exciting thing to see, especially when we think sort of about the location as well. When it comes to Africa, we still have a lot of emerging markets, and with the statistics about the South African financial fitness and how many of them consider themselves to be financially healthy, clearly an app like this is very useful, and there's the hope that it's going to make, a long-term impact. And I think, I just wanted to bring you guys on it to see what you thought about this. I mean, I'm sure a lot of the stuff we're going to say is kind of echo back to what we were saying at the very beginning, but just in general, like, how important are these kind of apps, especially when we think about sort of really locally focused as well? Like, obviously this one is open in South Africa, and having, the really local fintech platforms is that more useful than, you know, a broader range one? I mean, I'd love to get your guys' thoughts on this. So, Francis, I'll go to you first.
I think they can be as effective as sort of the big ones. I don't know how different a local. Oh, well, I guess maybe it can have a specific focus if it's just a national app. But what stood out to me, which I thought was really cool, was the idea. Well, not the idea, was the fact that the app already has over 200,000 pre-registered users, and I think that really goes to show how many people can think the service is going to be effective. And, you know, like we were saying earlier, all these different ways in terms of budgeting and financial wellness, and ensuring that, you know, if your finances are in order, your mental health is probably going to be in order, you feel more relaxed, you get put in a routine knowing, right, this is what I'm going to be spending where. And when all of that is in front of you, it creates a peace of mind. And I think the idea of, as from Vault 22, that users can set spending targets and stay accountable, I think that's another big factor, is this idea of staying accountable for your own spending. It really gives users the idea that they're in control of their finances. And I think that is a really, really key thing that any financial wellness app should strive to achieve. So, no, all in all, I think it is really, really good. And yeah, I can only imagine that it will be extremely beneficial.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, you've hit the nail on the head there with a lot of the points, and I think just the ability to be able to look at your finances in a way that, you know, I imagine if you've never used an app or a platform like this before, you'd never have seen your finances laid out in such, you know, a clear way. You know, I think to have the same sort of view on your spending, you'd have to make like a really big complicated spreadsheet as to like your ingoings and your outgoings and things like that. So to have, you know, a platform do that all for you, I expect for a lot of sort of first time users to any sort of similar financial wellness platform, that's going to be the first time you've ever seen everything laid out to you, so sort of like bare, with almost like no place to hide. So I think it's really helpful to have that view on your finances and on your spending, especially if you're someone, you know, like me and like a lot of people that is just doesn't like to know too much about how much money you're spending, and doesn't like to have too much of a view as to what's coming out of your account, because you know it's going to be a lot more than you think it is. So yeah, I can definitely see how this kind of app or platform would be useful. But I mean, Tom, what do you think? Where do you think the usefulness comes in?
I think going back to the point you made, the importance of having really locally focused apps is hugely important, because it basically means that firms can, you know, see with the landscape in a specific area and target that. I think in the article, the CEO, Benito Mabel, says that, you know, wealth management remains largely exclusive to high net worth individuals who have access to private banks and advisory networks in the region. But the mission has been to build an inclusive digital platform that empowers users across, you know, the entire country to make informed financial decisions. I think that's just hugely important, is recognizing that there is actually a disparity between, you know, those who do have a lot of money in their bank account and those that are struggling, and that the services aren't available for everyone, and it's trying to really create an inclusive app that is available to everyone in the country, regardless of their kind of financial situation. And I think having knowledge of that sort of local landscape and the way that, you know, people's attitude to money, how people like to access their money, is hugely important. And I think that has to be taken into account when you're trying to build these kind of offerings, because otherwise you are going to miss the mark and people aren't going to really make use of them as much as they could. And I think that's the most sort of important part. And I think that's why I can see this offering being successful, because like you said, it is that more locally focused, and it's not just trying to cast a net over the whole of, say, Africa or Europe. You know, being locally focused is going to have, you know, add a lot of value for people in that area, I think.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. You know, one of the things that we see time and time again is the need for, you know, personalized financial services, and I think localization does come a lot into that, especially from like the point of, you know, companies trying to move into a location, but also the companies that are starting grassroots in that location as well. It's important to actually acknowledge kind of both the financial ecosystem of that place, but also of the people and kind of what they want as well. So yeah, I think all in all, I think it's just a really great platform to see, and hopefully it does very, very well and helps a lot of people. But I mean, that does bring us to the end of our discussion today. I feel like we've had some really great points in a lot of fantastic things. So thank you so much, guys, for joining me as always. If you want to hear any more about what we've talked about today, or anything else about fintech for that matter, head on over to the fintechtimes.com, where we've got plenty more news and insights over there. So why don't we move on to what I learned this week? So each week we are learning so much new stuff about the fintech industry, being on the editorial team at the Fintech Times, that we thought it'd be fun to share that with our listeners. So Tom, what have you learned this week?
So this week I have been working on an article which is related to a new study that found that 81% of parents believe that their children learn positive money habits from video games such as Animal Crossing and The Sims, which, games that feature in-game economies, currencies, and incentives to save. And I just thought that was a very interesting way for kids to learn their own budgeting skills.
I love that. That's adorable. Francis, what have you learned this week?
So this week I learned that the global crypto exchange and Web3 company BitGet is back in the UK, providing British users with access to over 150 tokens and other digital assets. In May 2024, BitGet paused its services in the UK as it looked to ensure that it was compliant with the new FCA crypto regulations. But now, following approval from Archax, it is back in the UK. So I thought that was quite cool.
Awesome stuff. And what I learned this week is that Airwallex, a payments and financial platform, has launched a new program committing 1% of its equity to support innovation and entrepreneurship. And that 1% is currently worth about $56 million. So I thought that was just a really nice piece of news this week. So anyway, guys, thank you so much for joining me. It's been great to get the gang back together and actually have us all here to talk about fintech rather than just a couple of us at once. So thank you so much, guys, for joining with me. It has been an absolute pleasure as always. And I'll catch you on the next one.
See you guys next week.
See you guys then.
Thanks for listening to the Fintech Times News and Views podcast. Don't miss next week's episode and continue the conversation using hashtag TFT News and Views and follow us at the Fintech Times.